Welcome to this podcast, Clearing the Haze, Making the Invisible Visible, a podcast that discusses topics that are usually invisible or just hazy. I am your host, Shachi Irde. Please note, this podcast was recorded during the lockdown in the country with limited available resources. Therefore, the sound quality at times may not be at its best. We sincerely apologize for the same. The messages and stories shared here are definitely clear of any haze and enables inclusion for all. Our topic for today is acknowledging ability. More specifically, we will be talking to our guests from the Xavier's Resource Center for the Visually Challenged. Vision, as all of you know, is one of our five senses. Being able to see gives us tremendous access to learning about the world around us. People's faces, their expressions, play of colors, how different things look like in physical environments where we live and move, including approaching hazards or dangers in our path. Blind people or people with visual impairment can be as effective as sighted people as they have learned to use other senses and methods to learn the learning that takes place via vision for others. Despite being as effective as sighted people, they experience social exclusion. The people who cannot see beyond blindness are their biggest obstacle. Our guests today are Dr. Sam Taraporevala and Mr. Krishna Warrier, here to clear the haze by busting some myths and helping us embrace new understanding of how to include blind people in our lives.
So I'm going to ask, given that people have a misunderstanding about some of the myths, or people do not understand what and how to be inclusive, what kind of accessibilities are required? We spoke about people with visual impairment or blind people being actually independent. So to make them independent, or for all of us, we need accessible equipments with us. So what are some of the things that one should keep in mind while developing accessible products?
A brilliant question, and that's something we focus on a lot. Remember, we capture our world in our mind to process through our various senses. Sight is just one avenue. We can use touch, we can use the sense of hearing, smell, taste, whatever. Now, when we talk about products which are accessible, I would use the word universally designed. Mm-hmm. They should be such that a person, irrespective of sensory abilities or disabilities, should be able to use it. So, for example, if I have a product which has a display, can I also have an audio feed to it? For example, today in the contemporary film industry, for instance, you have audio-described movies coming in, audio-described tracks which come out. So yes, if I don't see a certain thing, at least I can listen to an audio description of the same. Likewise, I'm using a touch screen phone today. It would be a nightmare if that touch screen phone didn't give me an audio output. But today, thanks to screen readers and the ability to get things voiced, it becomes accessible. And hence, the idea of universal design, more importantly, the term is universal design, but I'd rather use the word optimum design. You can't meet all needs, but try to meet as many needs as possible.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sam. A friend of mine said that if you develop your product thinking about people with different needs, you will have a product that is accessible by most of them. Such a simple way to think about, and that's exactly what you also described as optimal design rather than universal design, which will be very helpful for maximum number of people. And all of us do need some kind of accessibility. Whatever kind of abilities you have, accessibility is a must, right? I'm going to ask about your program, Antarchakshu, the Eye Within, which is a flagship awareness and sensitization program developed by your institute. Can you share with us your thought behind this program and how it has been accepted by the people?
Sure. So the word Antarchakshu is actually a Sanskrit word. Chakshu in Sanskrit means the eye, and Antar means within. So Antarchakshu would read as the eye within.
Such a beautiful name.
Yes, thank you. This program was actually born out of the genesis of this program is that it was born in the year 2006 out of a grassroots need in St. Xavier's College. We have students with various disabilities studying in St. Xavier's College, visual impairment, learning disabilities, some from the autism spectrum. And when some of the students, when they approached Dr. Sam, people with visual impairment, they said that we're not able to interact as freely as we would like to with our classmates. So that's where Antarchakshu was born. We decided that at that point we needed to have a program where we would be able to spread awareness about this condition, about and bust all the myths about this condition. So it was born in 2006 as part of a very famous college festival that St. Xavier hosts. Probably you heard about it, Malhar. It was part of Malhar in 2006. But very soon, the organizers of Malhar, as well as us, we realized that it had to grow out of Malhar because it was earning a popularity of its own and attracting a large audience of participants. So Antarchakshu then actually took on different avatars. We started with Antarchakshu as an awareness event which used to be conducted in a large venue. It was a walkthrough event. People would walk in and after an hour or two walk out of that event, hopefully having a better idea about people with visual impairment and the lives that they lead. Then we started getting requests from very niche audiences, and so we decided to take Antarchakshu to these niche audiences as a very bespoke event, which we called Antarchakshu 2.0. And we used to go to the locations rather than asking the participants to come to one location. So this avatar of Antarchakshu, which was Antarchakshu 2.0, caters to smaller niche groups. The principle is the same. They go through a few simulated activities and then there's a discussion that follows that. And the third avatar of Antarchakshu happened when the pandemic began and the lockdown was imposed. And we had a brainstorming session at XRCVC and we said, we can't stop Antarchakshu, it needs to go online. So we decided to launch an online version, and very happy to share with you that we've done over 100 workshops during the lockdown online, which have been received very well.
Wow, what great impact, 100 sessions virtually, and you're already on your third version of the simulated walkthrough. This is amazing. It actually makes me feel very warm and nice saying that there are so many people wanting to learn and understand more about what life is for a person with low visibility or visual challenges. It's interesting. Given that there is one set of people who are wanting to engage and understand more, I have come across another set of people where they hesitate allowing their quote unquote able children to mingle and join schools which are open to all children. How do you educate parents of these children saying that it is a good idea to let their daughters, sons, or other children to mingle with every kind of people? That's how they become society ready. Don't you think so?
Very, very true. And yes, you would have sections of the population who have this anxiety or worry that, oh, I don't want to expose my child to person with disability. What if they become frightened, or perhaps could that rub onto them? The essential approach of any educational institution then is to not just educate the children, but educate the parents and tell them that, look, this is what we stand for. Mm-hmm. We are convinced that education is an all-round process and your child is going to live in society. And it's far better to expose them now to disability so that they know how to negotiate the world more effectively than creating myths. We are breaking myths in the minds of the child at that stage. I and my brother both were educated in a school, which is a mainstream school. And this was many, many years ago, almost 50 plus years ago that we went to school. And that was a time when mainstreaming was not much spoken about. And yet, the school took that positive stand, and I'm happy to say that I think my classmates would be far better able to relate to a person with disability today thanks to this. And so awareness generation among parents is also a very key element in this process, and making people realize that today one is able-bodied, but nobody is permanently able-bodied. Everybody is temporarily able.
Of course. Thank you, Dr. Sam, for explaining it so simply and so nicely that awareness is so important for not only children, but also adults and parents who can then understand why everybody should know what it takes to be you. Right? What are some of the common challenges people with visual impairment face in day-to-day life? And how can we make it easier? On one hand, we talk about inclusion, and with low awareness, there are challenges which people don't know. And is it correct to ask? Is it not correct to ask? Those are some questions which keep popping in people's minds. So can you throw some light on that?
Right. People with visual impairment face challenges just like all of us face challenges. Many times they're able to overcome the challenges on their own. One of the biggest problems that they face is the lack of awareness in the society around us, right? And because of lack of awareness, people make assumptions. And because people make assumptions, many things are not accessible to people with visual impairment. That is probably the biggest challenge. Do they need help? Of course, they need help.
Mm-hmm.
Do you and I need help? Of course, sometimes you and I need help as well.
Absolutely.
Right? The simplest thing to do is when you meet somebody with a disability, not just with visual impairment, to ask two questions. Do you need help? And if the answer is yes, in what way can I help you? Right? If there's somebody sitting on a wheelchair and you want to help that person climb up a staircase, will you lift the wheelchair? Will you lift the person? You don't quite know what you should be doing, right? So it's very simple. Ask two questions. Do you need help? And in what way can I help you? Sam, would you like to add to any of the challenges that people with
Definitely. In terms of creating an accessible world, yes, sometimes there are resource constraints, and at other times there are constraints in the mind of people. So we need to address it at both levels. The mindset has to be broken through legal as well as the process of awareness generation. So, for example, in the area of book access, let's say, because I spent my time in the educational field, the main challenge that anybody faces is if you want to learn, you want to study something, if your books are not there available to you in an accessible format, what do you do? So, at one level, we had to contest and get the copyright amendments. And today, I'm glad to say, not only does India have a law which allows for fair use for persons with disability, print disability, but also India is part of the Marrakesh Treaty. And we are able to, therefore, potentially share content globally. So that's one element, just one example in education. The other element about access is the whole part of making sure that you have products which are coming out, which are born accessible. And for that, one needs to lobby a lot with the various suppliers of products and services.
Thank you, Dr. Sam. There are so many things that one needs to do and one needs to continue to do to make sure that everyone's lives get easier. And I like what Krishna said, ask, don't assume, and ask, and then ask how, so that there is clarity for all as to how you can help and what really needs to be done. I met a young girl a few years ago. She was working in a large organization, but she had lost her eyesight due to allergic reaction to medicine. And it was not that she was born blind. For her to accept that she lost her eyesight and she is going to be challenged for the rest of her life made her go into depression. What kind of mental health and emotional well-being resources are available for them? Do the same set of doctors that treat people with normal visual are equipped to train, or rather equipped to engage with people who have lost their visual later in life?
Unfortunately not. And I've had ophthalmic surgeons tell us, well, we really don't know how to finally break the news to our patients, and therefore they keep sometimes just holding out straws of hope, and that's pretty problematic. The basic thing that one needs to do in such situations is seek assistance from organizations, professional organizations. People do come to us, for instance, and one of the first things we need to help people realize is, I'm going to use this term, to see reality.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I may not be able to see, but can I see reality?
Yes.
And in that process, we do have sessions with the individual concerned. For some, coming out of that period of loss, or what I may call sense bereavement, is perhaps a short period. For others, it takes longer. But a lot depends on how active the family support is also. Are they going to just mope and moan, or are they going to say, okay, now this is it. There are ways around it. Let's try to make the best of the situation. So we've had people, for example, we had a young boy in his 8th standard, the 8th grade, losing sight, and within 2 to 3 months, he had transited into effective use of a computer, and today he's doing well in a Western university. So,
awesome.
And whereas there could be others who would just remain behind. So a lot of it is individual based. There's no hard and fast rule, but the idea is to make people realize that, well, I have to come out of this. And providing pity is not going to solve the thing. Empathy would.
Yes, Dr. Sam. There are family support and motivation to self. And if we could have some counselors who could give proper guidance, which would help people overcome the challenges they have faced later in life, it would make so much more better for everyone.
We also do is we provide contact numbers of those who have volunteered among the late blind to also act as a type of peer mentoring support service.
That's exciting then. Thank you for sharing that, because yes, everybody would like to know somebody like them or have a role model which will help them, overcome the challenges faster. Yes, Krishna, please go ahead.
Yes, Shachi, I once met a student who had lost his sight at the age of 9 due to an accident. He could see very well till the age of 9. And this student put it very, very beautifully. I will never forget what he said. I asked him at that point, it must have been a very, very shattering experience for a 9-year-old to lose you lose your sight at that age. He said, I had two options in front of me, to cry or to try. So I asked him, which one did you take? And he said, obviously I cried, right? But how long can you cry? You have to stop crying at some point and start trying. And that stayed with me for a long time. It differs from person to person.
Yes, but if you have somebody like that, who's telling you that cry and try, it makes so much better, right? Yes, how long can you cry? But you can also start trying after you have done with your crying. I mean, I don't think I want to tell anybody don't cry, because holding your emotions back
That's
has
essential. That's absolutely essential.
Yes. So I'm going to, move to some other things that I've come across. India doesn't see what you call them as guide dogs. Can you throw some light on why we don't have guide dogs like what we see in the Western world?
There are a few reasons. That's a very good question, Shashi. There are a few reasons why you won't see too many guide dogs in India. I'll tell you a few of them that I can think of. Number one is the crowds in Bangalore or in Bombay or in Delhi. Imagine trying to get into a local train in Bombay. You would face trouble. Where would your guide dog be, right? So number one being the crowd, public infrastructure, public transport not being what it should be for the cities that we live in, and cost is another factor. Cost is quite a huge factor. Training a dog, making sure that and they don't live as long as we do, so you need to retrain another dog at some point. And another factor which is actually very, very important, what people don't realize, is there are many, many stray dogs on our streets.
Tell me about stray dogs.
Right, so if you had a guide dog and you had a problem of stray dogs as well, it just complicates things. Sam, is there anything that you'd like to add to this?
Beyond this, again, the whole cost factor in this guide dog training program itself is frightfully expensive. And if we could rather get people to hire cheaper labor to take people around sometimes. So having a guide dog provides independence.
Yes, there are many things that you both covered. Expenditure, costs, stray dogs, which I don't think many of us even give it a thought, saying that if I have a guide dog and a stray dog attacks the guide dog, what happens to the individual there? Because there is...
What happens even to the guide dog?
Yes, absolutely. The guide dog is harmed, and the individual is also could come under harm. It is a double whammy in many ways. So I think we are better off having another human being act as a guide for the person who wants some help or who is dependent on someone else. We don't have guide dogs. What are some of our products which are really helpful for the visually challenged, which are designed keeping them in mind? Can you share names of some products? I mean, if you're not
keeping them in mind, but keeping everybody in mind. And the whole concept of universal design today, your Apple phone is a brilliant case in point. It caters to multiple disabilities. Microsoft is trying to get that with its operating system. Your Android phone has accessibility built in. So it would be great to have people planning, keeping in mind the fact that their clientele could have varying abilities, varying levels of functionality. On the other hand, we still have people coming out with products. I walked into a building with an elevator which has a touchscreen panel. I don't know where to go. Or the voice activation on that elevator, even though it's built into the elevator, is not activated so that you don't know which floor you've landed on. Or you have sometimes a washing machine, for instance, with only a touchscreen interface. Again, a night. So why can't the accessibility be kept in mind while designing? It's going to help everybody. And remember, we are also going to have a very large elderly population very soon. They are not going to be as tech efficient or tech savvy as everybody else.
Yes, I know how I'm teaching my parents to make use of touchscreen phones. Yes, Krishna, please go ahead.
Speaking about devices, there are some manufacturers who are extremely sensitive to the fact that that there are people with needs that need. For example, in the pandemic, one of the biggest challenges that people with visual impairment faced was social distancing. You cross a road normally by holding on to somebody's elbow, right? It's called the sighted guide technique.
Yes.
That's how you cross a road. Now you are being discouraged from touching anybody. How do you manage to do that? You are quarantining in a room where you're supposed to take your your temperature and check your oxygen level. So there are manufacturers, Shachi, you'll be very happy to hear, who put out a pulse oximeter, a thermometer, which talks. So it's a talking pulse oximeter, it's a talking thermometer, and that did help. So there are a fair number of people who are sensitive to this, but as Sam was saying, there is an equal number of people who probably don't think about this. The other thing is that there are visually impaired. This is not charity. There's a large market out there. There are people who can afford it and are willing to purchase it, right? They're not asking for it for free.
You bring a great point, Krishna, when you're talking about these products which have been designed, keeping visually impaired people in mind. Are there any laws or are there any product standards that manufacturers can actually follow to ensure that they are complying to certain standards when they are designing these products?
There are norms. So, for example, in terms of web accessibility, the World Wide Web Consortium, WCAG, has a current standard which is 2.1, which is in the process of being further upgraded. Again, for mobile accessibility, you have mobile accessibility standards. The point being that standards are there, but some countries have laws. India has laws, but not totally implemented. Some other countries implement these laws more strictly, where if you don't meet a certain criteria, sorry, your product will not be, for example, on the purchase list.
Right.
We also have laws, for example, for banking access in India. But unfortunately, even today, even though the Reserve Bank of India says all ATMs have to be accessible, they are not. And therefore, you have the option of going for litigation, or have the option of going for persuasion. And perhaps sometimes you need to do both.
Great. What role do corporates play in this? How much of influence do they have? What kind of challenges corporates are able to actually support, navigate for inclusion?
It varies. Maybe if some of our employers see themselves as equal opportunity employers, where they look at their workforce and they want to have a diverse pool because that actually enriches their ability to function rather than have everybody of the same mindset. And you do have employees like that. You also have laws within India's government sector which makes it mandatory to have 5% of jobs reserved for persons with disabilities.
Yes.
That is not so in the corporate private sector, but there are some private sector companies that are employing. But again, they need to look at this as a complete career path, not as just as an entry-level job, because that can cause even more frustration.
Absolutely. Thanks for sharing how organizations are doing their bit to drive inclusion in the workplace. And I think what is coming clear is that if there is intention, then inclusion is possible. And if intention and inclusion happens, then the wide range of people can get employed and really truly live up to the expectations of diversity and inclusion, including equity. Any last thoughts on resources or advice to our listeners on how they can increase their influence over being inclusive?
Well, Krishna did mention the thing about asking, and I would also say one more thing, something I'm going to pick up a word which you used about assume. Don't assume that a person with disability is either incapable or ultra excellent. Both people with disability are humans first, and they are then persons with disability. Don't put the disability first, put the human being first. And once you do that, you're going to be setting the scene right, because then you will not assume. Because if you assume, you're going to land up in a problem. Make an ass of you and me. That's ASSUME. So that's just a simple thought. Don't assume.
Thank you so much. Krishna, would you want to add something?
I think Sam summed it all up. Don't make an ass of you and me.
Thank you. So bottom line, listeners, please don't make an ass of you and me. Let's be inclusive with being intentional. Ask, don't assume. Help, ask how to help. And that's the short and the long of being inclusive. Thank you so much, Dr. Sam and Krishna, for being with us today and helping our listeners bust some myths and get inclusive. Thank you.
Thank you. It was a pleasure. Stay safe, stay healthy.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for listening in. For this episode, we would like to thank our two guests, Sam Taraporevala and Krishna Warrier, the Alliance Sponsors of Mumbai, Siddharth Bhatt, Cultural Coordinator, Alliance Sponsors Mumbai, the French Embassy, the French Institute, and the Alliance Sponsors Network in India for producing the show. Our special thanks to Hemant Sarang and his team for their advice and technical support. Please do subscribe and review the show, available in various podcasting platforms and on the website afindia.r/podcast. Listen into the voices that are often invisible but powerful enough to clear the haze.